TLDR, for anybody who has not been following the content and kind of my frustrations with it, this has just obviously been building up over the years, finishing off Endwalker, finishing off Omni 90. When it ended up coming to kind of a questionable head where I was originally concerned, but in a way very relieved and very peaceful with it, is when Criterion came out the same day as New World's update, and I found myself literally not wanting to play 14. It was just like, oh, I want to spend time, and I continue to spend time in New World, which I've been just enjoying over the last year. I know I'll get people thinking, somebody already said, you're just jumping on the hype train for New World. It's like, yeah, no, I've been leading the charge for the last year with this game. And when it came down to it, I look at over 13 years, over I think roughly 130,000 hours spent talking, dreaming, covering this game, that it was just like, wait a minute, like Endwalker feels like a really good natural exit. And so what I say in the video, and Chris, you might react to it, I kind of give my reasons and what I'm focusing in on in terms of family, comedy, and it's like when it comes down to being like trying to split my time between a lot of different games that require investment just isn't healthy. And so I found myself going like, yeah, I've had a lot of critique, a lot of complaints, a lot of frustrations with the development and history 14, especially since Stormblood. And the point is that, what, I'm good. I finished the story. It felt like a natural exit point for the game itself, for me as somebody who's been around just for the story, but working on the controller guides for the community. And so my plan is I'm going to finish the controller guide series, which I only have 6 left to go. And then essentially I'm going to be asking the question is, will 14 invite me back in? So most likely that seems like 7.0 might be a natural time to come back and kind of play through the story if I just want to become a story player. But I'm not committing or promising that 7.0 will actually bring me back. We have FanFest coming up and I want to go see everybody and hang out. So right now I guess I'm going to keep my subscription to 14 so that way I can, if we don't get media pass tickets, hopefully get tickets and come out and hang out with everybody. But yeah, that's just where I'm at with it. And at the end of the day, like if being able to kind of, share that with everybody felt very peaceful. Like it just felt like a weight was off my shoulders. And so, yeah, I know the feedback that I continue to provide 14 just isn't feasible to their current design and budget. And so who knows if that will change. But why be mad at a game when I've had nothing but a good experience with it? And I think now it's time to make my exit with 14. That's the TLDR.
Yeah. Okay. So TLDR, Brian is, kind of packing up his stuff and slowly saying farewell to the game for now. And there may not ever be a return date.
There probably will
still
be.
Still finish everything that's on his plate. So, as he kind of finished up the last 6 controller guides, there hasn't been like an insane rush on those. So they'll get there when they get there. So still for the foreseeable future, it's everything is normal, but I think it helps give some context. We've been getting a lot of comments lately about when Brian and I disagree on something. There have been people who have said that the way Brian has phrased the way he disagrees with me in a way that feels like antithetical to the direction 14's going. Mm-hmm. And so there have been people that have said like, I just don't know if 14's the right game for Brian right now in the comments. And like, that's been conversations that you and I have been having anyway, like outside of videos. So like it's completely logical that there's a point, and it's something that I've been really frustrated with some other content creators that instead leverage all of their complaints at the game and say like, this game has screwed me, this game has lied to me, and they get really frustrated at a game or a genre when it feels like, okay, well, the game just went its path and you went yours. It's not like you're married filing jointly, like it's just take a step back and play something else.
Exactly.
Flip to a different game, flip to a different genre, and as you continue to evolve in what you want from games, and as the game continues to evolve, it's possible you cross paths again. There's no reason to go to the point where you're bitter towards each other.
100%. And that's where I see a lot of people, and the reason why I wanted to actually share the video that I made is that I've taken breaks from 14 before. Like I usually have just taken them privately because it's like, yeah, of course, I'm just taking a break. This feels very, very complete. But even in the video, I talk about like the opportunity for the game to invite me back in, the opportunity for my kids at one point to sit down and say, hey dad, I want to play 14, then the answer is like, absolutely. I have no ill will to the time that I spent in 14, but there are things and systems that I find appealing, and I find those appealing and enjoyable in other games. And so you've always asked me, it's like, well, like, why aren't you playing that game more? And it's like, well, you know, like, there's things, there's hooks, there's a sense of, you know, there's a sense of responsibility that I feel like I have. And one of the questions that I was like, for those who actually like watch the video, like, it did bring out the 14 Defense Force to a degree, but overall, like, again, the likes on that video were like really well, the overwhelmingly positive comments. And then of course I'm not gonna focus in on the negative Andes out there because they're not worth the time. But the like, outside of that, it's like those who watched it, it's like, I have a lot of history with the game. You and I are still going to cover live letters here, and I say that up to the point where if it causes more hurt, if people are like, this guy doesn't even play the game, you know, like, and it really starts upsetting a vast majority of the community, I'd be willing to have that conversation and say, I'm not going to do it at that point. But I don't actually see that as a future, because despite like the negative Andes out there that, you know, tend to pop up from time to time, like, they're off in their corner just being negative and hateful. Most likely, I think people would enjoy my perspective, because ultimately what I'm going to be watching the game for is this my re-entry point? Is this the time where they're going to invite me back in? But that's why I always want to be very clear. I'm not saying that I'm coming back for 7.0. I would like it if the game invited me back, and it's going to have to be, it's more than story. It's going to have to be systems, because I felt like I've played a completed story, and to go, you know, chunk by chunk, I would rather them go and develop their story, and at some point, whether it was 8.0 or 9.0, to come back and be like, okay, cool, here's this grand adventure.
Pandemonium so much, it'd be so hard not to stay through 6.4 to see that.
I'll wait till let people tell me.
I think that the other thing with live letters is, like, I'm playing more of the game than ever before in, like, breadth and depth. Mm-hmm. So, like, it would still be the two of us covering it. So I don't actually feel it's a bad thing to have somebody in the room that's asking questions that, you know, sometimes we forget. I think a lot of Work to Game has been a landing page for people just getting started in the game. Mm-hmm. And there were a ton of people sharing comments in your comment section on both of your videos about, like, you know, that you or us were the reason they got into 14. Mm-hmm. And so we've continued to try to, like, we talked about your brother playing the game, and that we would pay his sub. This was back when the channel first started making like $10 a month. And we're like, we're going to take the entire $10 a month and we'll pay his sub, but he has to play with us so that we can write down all his questions. And it was like literally like, how do we make Work to Game better? And we were like, the best $10 we could have would be to have somebody that we already know likes RPGs come tell us all of their questions about 14. Mm-hmm. So I think that's still fine. Work to Game started as Brian and I always like talking about video games, and the game we most shared was Final Fantasy 14. But it has gone through phases where we've talked about other games on Work to Game. It's gone through phases where we exclusively talk about Final Fantasy 7 times a day. Mm-hmm. It's always been the dominant game, but like, as we've shifted to less and less Final Fantasy coverage over the last year, I think it's been really clear. And I think to a lot of people, that's been a really fair chance to evaluate, is that something they're interested in? And by and large, the people who've been around seem to have been having a great time. We've been enjoying the discussions, but we've been losing subscribers every single video. But that's not like, what we want is a group of people that want to discuss video games with us.
Right.
And not so I think in that goal, it's being successful. Algorithmically, it's doing terrible, but
I think eventually that hits a point, because I haven't been covering 14 over on Prime. And to see all the subs lost through that video is actually a really positive thing in my mind, because they weren't watching my other content. In fact, I got a lot of comments that are like, oh, what else are you going to talk about? It's like, well, I'm going to keep doing exactly what I've been doing. Like we got into the first Ascendant beta. I haven't had a chance to play it, because guess what, guys? Like, I absolutely am so swamped with life. Like, this whole weekend was insane. Like, it was like, oh, are you going to do whatever this weekend? It's like, when was I home? I don't even like, and then when I'm home, I'm taking care of kids. So it's like, if I get the opportunity to talk about a game and play a game, that's going to be the case. People ask me if I'm going to be playing 16. It's like, well, once we refill and hopefully refill the savings account from, you know, this past summer of weirdness, you know, and then if I walk into a store and find a PS5, well then, yeah, absolutely. I'm going to be playing 16 day and day. in that regard. So it's like, I'm going to keep, covering variety content that I want to cover, and keep talking about kind of the issues and the subjects that I want to talk about. And algorithmically, if people aren't going to watch that content in the first place, then I honestly don't really want them to subscribe, because that actually suppresses the videos overall. And that's why I've seen success in the multi-channel approach for me personally, because like I like to be able to make a 3-minute video about a subject, and because that's all it needs to be. And then in terms of variety, you end up having to do a lot of extra work and trying to get that video in front of people, and I don't like that approach. I don't like that what you have to do to get somebody to watch a video, that if it's not their normal reason why they subscribe. Because ultimately the biggest number is that we know that people usually subscribe for a game over the creator, and finding people who sub for the creator over a game is essentially like the best thing that could possibly happen. But it is the rare egg, it is the shiny Pokemon in that regard.
It has downsides as well. It has, right, I think parasocial relationships get really dangerous.
You've changed, man. You've changed. Like, I hope to God I have.
So I think the question is then, like, how do we tackle subjects where you are less educated on 14 as a result of stepping back? And I've had the same criticism of people that criticize WoW as they switch to 14. My question is, how do they stay relevant? Like, their knowledge is relevant the first day they step out, but once it's been 2 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, how do they retain that? And like, you guys have seen me doing collabs with Rin Karagani and stuff when I had questions about the state of Savage, because honestly, at that point, my thought would be, why would Brian and I be the perfect people anyway? We should be inviting people who are more of those experts. So it's a great chance to do more collabs and bring back more podcasts to kind of bring that educated view into the room. And that allows us to be educated on way more topics than Brian and I ever could, because there is an expert for anything, which is absolutely wonderful. And then Crail asks, like, okay, well then how does monetization work? And this is something that Brian and I don't typically talk about. But monetization is already something that Brian and I split. That's already something that happens. So to kind of just TLDR it because it does change from time to time, because what we do changes. Since I do the majority of the work on Twitch, I take the majority of the pay. And then we negotiate on what that percentage is based on, there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff as well. And kind of how things affect it. So it's not necessarily like just divide live hours. Like, that isn't actually a good representation of what makes Twitch successful. And then Ginger Prime is totally a Brian thing. That's why when we were dual streaming live streams and Brian was over on Ginger Prime and I was on Work to Game, like, back before Twitch loosened up their, like, you can't dual stream, we weren't. Like, that is a totally separate thing. I have no ownership over that, as opposed to I do have ownership over Work to Game. I get the W2 for YouTube. Yeah. So then Gaming Kinda is me. Gaming Kinda sits much closer to Work to Game for me, because they're both in the same drop down. And so Gaming Kinda is me, and it's something that's been more hit or miss. But obviously, as I want to talk about 14 more often than Brian may want to, then the absolute top topics can continue over here. And then as we get into things like what's going on with this one particular reward in Island Sanctuary, that can shift over there, and that can be where those discussions from stream go. So when people donate or support us, like Krikov with 13 months, that all gets divided out. So there have been people sometimes that come in and make a donation to you or I when, like, Work to Games live, either on Twitch or on YouTube, and say, hey, make sure the other one gets some of this.
And
that already takes place. The YouTube side is dead 50-50. It has been that way for more months than not. The Twitch side shifts a little more because the work going into it shifts a little more. And
Twitch is like, you have a couple things happening at the moment. Like, you have their ad incentive, which you guys have been seeing, and especially you've seen other creators, talk about. That's why one of the best things that you guys can do non-financially is lurk on the Twitch stream. Like, when we say that, like, even if you're just like going to work and you're like, I don't care if that Chris is playing Guild Wars today. Like, but if you're able to lurk on that stream, that helps drive up that ad incentive, and it's not really impacting you because you're just kind of lurking and it's just kind of running, on its own. And that helps actually drive people to the stream. Regardless of what people think about the recommendations, what you still see is that it's a kingmaker system. The people who have the biggest numbers tend to get the lion's share of people coming in and checking out and discoverability. And so YouTube, like when I talk to people about getting started in content creation, YouTube's discoverability is still the dominant factor. If you're not posting on YouTube, you're not getting discovered. And that's when, like what I've always talked with Chris, is like Chris has and will always have more time to stream than I do. Now, my kids go off to college, that could possibly change, but we're talking that's a long content creation career that usually spans longer than most content creators continue to do this. But we have a passion for making videos. We love talking about video games. We'd just still be doing this, just less frequently, if it wasn't for y'all's support.
Yeah, your brother, I was at dinner with your brother and a friend of mine the other night, and the three of us guys were sitting there, and they're like, what would you do if you won the lottery? And both of them, as much as they love and feel immense pride in their careers, said step one would be quit their job, because they want to spend time with, and they're like, what would you do? And I was like, well, I would keep doing what I'm doing. Like I legitimately like what I'm doing. So like it wouldn't change. Maybe we move to giveaways instead of sponsorships. Like there's an inversion on which way the money's going, but like I would still be like, yeah, I still want to get up in the morning and play video games and talk about video games with people. Like that sounds like the goal, not the thing to get away from. Like, that's the objective. I'm charging towards that. Yeah. My question right now is, how do I do more of it?
Yeah. And so like, and for those of you who want to know, like Chris primarily handles all the sponsorships. So it's like he gets all of that. Like, and that's just kind of our deal. Like like, like I get stressed out by sponsorships. Like if you guys had never seen, like it just stresses me out. I'm like, not worth it. It's like, has it been worth it? If it ever becomes worth it, like I'll let you guys know. But somebody's like, you should take on sponsorships. Since I get emails, and I always just like, I know we've actually done a couple sponsorships through Work to Game on Twitch and did not get paid for that work. And so it's like, I'm good. And so I have
it's a lot to manage for the fact that at the end, the company may not pay you. And these companies, they're fly by night companies. They pop up and fold. So like you're wondering the entire time if you get, so when you see us sign with a deal and then like I sign in again with them and I'm super excited about it, it's easier to be more excited the second time, because you just know that like they're going to meet their end. Like if they're trying to like send you merch, or they're going to send merch out to a viewer, like you do a giveaway, you're like, I hope they get it. And so as soon as you have somebody that's reputable, you're like, oh, thank God. Like, it's just that entire piece is removed. Like, just all I wanted you was to do your job. Like, that's it. Thank you and like, I have sent them huge, profound thank you emails on like how wonderful they are for responding to emails and mailing out the things they said they'd mail. And they're like, really? And I'm like, you have no idea. You are in the top 10% of companies. You're doing amazing.
Yeah.
They're like, but it's my job. I understand that.
Yeah, we know. We know. But yeah, we thank you guys obviously for the support. And in terms of that, like the option is always to continue to bring on experts. Work to Game is always envisioned as that collaborative discussion, piece. And the fact that we'll be talking about more MMOs, which you've already seen happen over the last couple of months anyway, with Guild Wars, New World, talking about Ashes of Creation, looking forward to like other upcoming games, etc., with like a real interest, and hopefully giving you guys like our real expressions. That's one of the things that we feel like we have always brought, even when we know it costs us subscribers, even when we know we would be much bigger if we just placated to the groupthink that exists within gaming, etc. We want to continue to give you guys our honest thoughts, not our like bought and paid for thoughts. That I'm not going to sit here and say anybody else is doing that, but at the end of the day, like we know what we say sometimes rubs people the wrong way, but we feel like it's important to say it, and we will. And you guys can guarantee that it's going to continue on for the time being. Now, Chris is going to continue being live over on Twitch, so we hope that you go hang out with him today, because he's got lots of stuff. I'm really curious to see what happens today. I'm sure we'll get some fun reactions out of the news. Somebody said that we're actually trending on the official forums, so that's a new thing for us, for me, I guess, and what we talked about here today. So I haven't gone to look. We'll see it, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. We're gonna head over to Twitch, and we'll see you next time. But until then, take care.